right, here we go. This is the System Failure Podcast, number 56.
Hey, Brian, how's it going for you this week?
Well, I'm getting over a bit of a cold.
You sound a bit nasally in the microphone, but not terrible. It sounds like you are most of the way mended, huh?
I am on the mend after a couple days of incredibly packed sinuses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you play in a Magic tournament yesterday, or did you cancel said tournament because of the disease?
Yeah, no, I just stayed home and
I
laid
see.
in bed. And, I was just pressing my hand into my forehead to deal with the sinus pressure.
Oh, man, that sounds like a brutal couple of days. Well, you seem mostly back to normal, other than possibly a little bit nasally, as mentioned.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Well, did you spend the week using the advice of Tracy the Wise, specifically vis-a-vis taking ChatGPT or some other large language model and using it as a device to turn the telescope of consciousness back on itself, like the magical Ouroboros symbol of the snake eating its own tail? Have you been integrating with your shadow self?
I've been working on it.
I mean, when you have the plague on, that's no real time for like psychic maintenance. You're like trying to just feel better, huh?
Well, I mean, I pour a lot of thoughts into the ChatGPT, and so I don't expect it to overnight change my life. But, I do have like a schedule set up, and it's all posted on my fridge now, and yeah.
What is the nature of the schedule of yours?
Well, I'm just trying to get up at 5:30 like every weekday, and I'm trying to do the yoga and the kung fu, and I'm trying to fall asleep at a reasonable hour. So I stopped drinking caffeine afternoon. Although, we're having caffeine slightly afternoon to record this podcast today.
I always do that. I never want to be hitting up cups of coffee. 12:30 is okay, but I mean, at work I can see how it happens because you're at work, and you get that afternoon, especially if you've had lunch. You have that afternoon crash. It's like 2:23, and you're like, oh man, how am I going to make it to 5? And a cup of coffee is just a thing to get a little squeeze of dopamine out of your brain. But yeah, it's not good for sleep though. All the sleep experts say you got to avoid that caffeine in the PM hours.
It is a feeling of damnation, when you're like insanely tired at your desk trying to keep your eyes open, doing some pointless spreadsheet or something else.
The clock just will not. You're like you can't. Clock watching. It's just a special kind of hell.
And then, then you drink some coffee, and then you get home, and then you can't fall asleep till the wee hours of the morning. Yeah. And so I guess I've only been doing it for like a week, but my sleep schedule hasn't completely sorted itself out, but I just definitely noticed that I sleep like a lot better though at night, not having caffeine afternoon.
Yeah.
So that's a big improvement. And I guess I post a lot of thoughts. I mean, I think the grand conclusion of our podcast with Tracy the Wise there is just like thinking about like your anxiety, or you have all these feelings that relate to you say like little Brian. Like, is this how little Brian would handle the situation, or is this how big Brian would handle the situation? It sounds a little lame, but it's very pertinent, I guess. Or yeah, I mean, you come out of the womb like a screaming child, right? And and how much of that are we like? You want to not be like a slave to entropy, right? And shine the divine light of God or whatever onto the trials and tribulations that you have to face, and sort of not be a slave to entropy, right? So, it's an ongoing challenge. But anyway, yeah, I did pay the $20 for the advanced ChatGPT subscription. And it in some ways, I'm less pessimistic about the future, that our artificial intelligence overlords are going to, replace all of us, and we're just going to be slaves and not have any jobs. Or using AI just seems like super helpful, and figuring out how to integrate AI into your life seems like something we should all be doing.
Yeah, it does. It's an amazing glimpse into the future, these large language models. The thing that blows my mind is I always thought that the Turing test, or the thing where you're chatting with it and it seems like it's totally, you wouldn't, if you went into a room and there was 2 computer terminals, and one was a real person and one was some chat program, the point at which you would no longer be able to tell the difference was always the Turing test was the way that you would try to tell the difference. And if you couldn't tell the AI from the authentic person, then you had that was supposed to be a big marker of the arrival of AI. But we really don't have anything like AI. But we have blown past the Turing test. It's totally convincing. It feels like you're chatting with another entity, even though it's just computing the probability of the next word in your sentence, I agree. It really does seem like the future is here, Brian, with the old AI and other the old ChatGPT and other large language models.
Yeah, I wonder if Reddit seemed good when it first came out. There's a lot of like rage face memes and whatnot, and it was like a positive environment, and then it eventually became a thing of doom, as we've talked about many times.
Well, it became an apparatus of state propaganda, and not at all a consensus among a disparate group of people. And so, it really became, I think it was about 2016. That's usually the date I think you cite, Brian. But that's when Reddit went on lockdown, and it's just hopeless. The frontier of pirate communication seems to be more Twitter now than Twitter now seems like Reddit was then. And Reddit now is like YouTube or Instagram, just locked down to where there's no dissenting from what the powerful want us to discuss on these platforms.
Well, I don't know how good Reddit ever really scrolling through hundreds of pages of rage faces. Was that? Or I guess random acts of pizza is cool and whatnot, but that doesn't seem nearly as promising as using some kind of language model to analyze your inputs and put out stuff, about your shadow self and whatnot, and it can play a much more active role in yourself that isn't just staring at a screen and wasting away.
Well, I almost entirely agree, just with the exception that Reddit still has a lot of value if you're looking for something on which the deep state, if you're looking for things the deep state doesn't care about. How do I rotate my fridge door so it opens on the left instead of on the right? Google has been so destroyed by its, the Google search bar has been so destroyed by its profit motive that the best way to get it to work now is to type your search and then type Reddit at the end. Again, as long as it's something that the rich and powerful don't care about, you'll get great answers on Reddit. There's a couple decades worth of there's a couple decade back catalog of really good information on Reddit. I think the site has so much potential, and I prefer the format of Reddit so much more than X. You click on a post in X, and the comments rarely have anything to do with the post. Where Reddit doesn't have that issue. It relies on an army of unpaid volunteers to moderate it. But I generally agree that AI is the next best thing, where Reddit used to be the new and exciting thing on the internet. Now the AI is.
Yeah, well, Reddit is a great source of information. And Wikipedia is good too if it's not some political topic.
Yeah.
I guess just Reddit as a means of entertainment is just always questionable, I suppose. But a good source of non-political information for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the infinite scroll, which Reddit and Twitter and everything has become the infinite scroll, right? Where you're scrolling through your timeline or feed. It's no longer a timeline, right? It used to be that on Facebook things would be organized in chronological order. The post, your feed, but now it's not that. It's just whatever it thinks whatever it thinks can keep you scrolling for as long as possible, so they can cram as many ads down your gullet as they possibly can. The effect of the attention span, the effect of the infinite scroll on attention span is clearly a disaster. You're right about that. You have to time box. I should be better about this. You have to time box your time on any kind of infinite scroll so that you don't blow out your attention span and you're still able to focus. Being able to focus is a very useful skill, especially if you have to write weekly Substack essays.
Yeah, obviously there's no feature of doom scrolling in the ChatGPT, so that works out well.
I reckon the main prophecy here at System Failure is that we have a two-horse race going on for the collapse of capitalism. There's the one where the banks print money out of thin air when they make loans, and they always produce more debt than dollars, and so there's an inevitable collapse coming on that front. And then there's the other front, which you just referenced, where the AI is going to take everyone's jobs, and That's going to be great for the first 15 minutes for those people who own the factories, who can seize all the money, who can own the machines, until they realize that their factories can produce widgets all day long. If there's no one that can afford to buy them, it doesn't do them any good to have the money either. And the entire system is scheduled for to come tumbling down because of that prophecy. So it's like I never really know which marble is winning in this race down the marble tracks to the bottom. But your reference there to AI possibly being an instrument of apocalypse and Armageddon, definitely one of them. But hey, maybe in between now and the apocalypse, it can help us. It can help us all recover our mental health to at least some degree.
Yeah. Well, there's at least AI has the potential to, better life for the proletariat.
Has the potential, yeah. I mean, as long as it doesn't, again, it's going to wipe out so many jobs, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on prevailing. It's going to drastically change prevailing conditions in the labor market. Create the same number of people desperate for an ever shrinking pool of available jobs, and it's not good. If one industry loses their jobs and turns a bunch of unemployed former workers loose them into the job market writ large, then it affects everyone's job, everyone's ability to negotiate for pay. Right? I'm sure that. It's not that, like, precarity and desperation in the working class is extremely... if you think of the stock market as the amount of money we can skim off the top of all these businesses, the amount of extra money all these businesses are making, right? The delta between what it costs to make things and then what you can sell things for. That delta, if the labor market is desperate, then it becomes a lot cheaper to make things. And if the labor market is feeling good, like they have plenty of money and they aren't heavily motivated, well, then it's going to be a lot more expensive to make things. So the people who own the companies that provide the goods and services love precarity in the labor market. And I think that they don't care that they could. I think that the people that own and run our massive means of production are willing to lose some money in the short run to keep the labor market in a state of precarity, because that's really because you can make the apparatus of American industry so much more profitable with each click with each additional desperation you pile onto the working class. So I think that they're willing to sacrifice the amount of money that they're willing to sacrifice to make sure that life is tough for the working class, making sure that we don't have, even though universal healthcare is a good one. I reckon that would save money for the people that have to run factories, or the people who have to make a payroll every week. If they didn't have to take care of the healthcare piece, it would be a lot easier for them, and they could theoretically sell products at lower prices. But really, what they'll do is they'll keep the price the same and make their business more profitable. But I think that they would rather forego all of that and keep us in a state of desperation, right? Yep. Because if you depend on your job for your healthcare, you're going to be a lot less likely to quit, a lot more desperate, and a lot more likely to slave away at your desk without asking any complicated questions, demanding any pay raises for longer, eh?
Well, I think the desperation is more about maintaining political control.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we would rather. It's more important to have political control than to make a buck in the here and now. Yeah, I think that's exactly the case, Brian.
I think that's especially clear in recent years, or I guess that's sort of what happened during the COVID, right? Or we had all these lockdowns that destroyed the economy.
Yeah.
And although it is good if you're, Amazon or Walmart, but it's real bad if you're trying to run a restaurant.
Yeah, a mom and pop joint. Well, I suppose that brings us to an exciting article we had in the local paper this week, the Portland Press Herald. Now, we were talking moments ago about the Marxian prophecy of technology totally obviating totally making the workforce redundant and irrelevant to an ever increasing degree. So that's one horrifying, marble rolling down that track. But on the other side is again, I mentioned the system we have of fractional reserve lending. That is definitely going to bring down this economy. So it's like industrial capital with its employers and its employees on the one side, and then finance capital on the other. Which one's going to destroy us first? I suppose we had a lot of restaurants closed and announced closures in the past month. Here in Maine, This is the very end of tourist season. The leaves are all in their peak foliage. The trees are all in their peak foliage. The reds and the oranges and the yellows are absolutely brilliant. But this is about it. Another couple of weeks, the tourists will all head out, and Maine will lock down for the winter. And some towns like Bar Harbor, Maine, will have a fraction of their summertime population for the next several months. So here in Portland, the slow season is coming up. And so, of course, now is when a lot of businesses are announcing their closings, and we had a whole rash of them the last couple of weeks. So much so that the Portland Press-Herald saw fit to publish an article entitled, "Why So Many Greater Portland Restaurants Are Closing and More Could Be Coming." Now, this is just for public consumption. The Portland Press-Herald is owned by a huge corporation, so I don't know how much of their proposed explanation for the restaurant closings comes from the fact that the editors have bosses who aren't going to want anything implicating major corporations or capitalism, but let's. I
feel like this is going to be good.
This is going to be terrible.
It's going to be rich.
Okay. Though not all the business owners explain their decisions publicly or return calls seeking interviews, common factors for many included sharply rising expenses, increased competition in an intensely seasonal market. And then other local restaurateurs said people are dining out less often, and with the industry's busiest time of year behind it, the rash of fall closures is not surprising. Tastes are shifting. People are eating out less. Rising costs, which is the real explanation, but it doesn't. But it hides neatly the role of finance in this. So. Sharply rising expenses, increased competition, intensely seasonal market. So we'll just focus on the expenses. It's just basically saying, well, expenses are rising, and maybe people don't eat out as much as they used to. Certainly, a big part of that has got to be the transition from alcohol to marijuana. Right? If you have marijuana, you don't want to go out to someone's crowded bar or restaurant and get destroyed paying $15 a drink. What you want to do is stay home, order from Grubhub, watch Netflix and pop a half dozen weed gummies. That's an evening for most people nowadays. So there definitely is it's not that the things that they wrote are untrue, but they just don't get to the heart of the matter. And as we talked about when we had renowned economist Dr. Michael Hudson on the show, what's really at play here is that the systems of finance or money creation are blowing out the cost of everyone's rent. And there's commercial rent, which of course is going to be overblown, but in order for a restaurant to have cooks and cleaners and waiters and table busters and hosts and all of the staff you need to run a restaurant, you're going to have to pay all those people enough to live within within a reasonable distance of Portland, if not the city proper, and rents are just blown out everywhere. And so it is destroying the fact that workers have to demand so much just to cover their monthly rent means that the restaurateurs no longer have a viable business model. And that, I think, is fundamental to what's happening here. And the reason that housing prices are going up is because of the way that we create money when we make housing loans. The fact that housing prices, the trend has been for housing prices to drift upwards, means that people are taking out bigger and bigger mortgages. Whether they're going to be potential landlords or live in the houses themselves, they're comfortable taking out bigger and bigger mortgages because they're confident that the banks in the future will loan even more money against the exact same structures. If your house cost $500K in 2024, then maybe it's going to cost $600K by 2030. And so all of the rise in housing prices is financial speculation with borrow. It doesn't matter how much money you borrow for a house if you think you'll be able to cover the cost of borrowing in 10 years when you go to sell the house. And so there's a distinction here between use value and the amount of what it's actually worth to live in a place, and exchange value, what you expect that value to be worth on an exchange 10, 20, 30 years from now. And if we simply taxed away the speculative value of homes, this is the whole idea behind the Georgist movement, named after a 19th century economist. But if you tax away speculative increases in the value of homes, then loans will no longer be made that generate those speculative gains, right? It's like, it is a lot like the snake that eats its own tail that we just talked about, the Ouroboros, right? It's like, well, I expect this structure will increase in value, so I will borrow an amount of money that bakes in that expectation, and then that expectation is what causes the house to increase in value, and then you get a cycle that has been going on now for the better part of a generation, and that I think is the way that we generate money through lending is what's really like finance capital is what's really blowing out the businesses here in Portland. Right? It's not as if there's been some labor saving device that means that restaurateurs don't have to employ people anymore, and then so many people are out of work that there's no one to eat at their restaurants. That Marxist philosophy does not apply here. The one that applies is finance and the way that we generate money.
Well, so I guess the Press Herald article there, it wasn't as rich as I thought it might be. Yeah. They just didn't have someone like you to go in there and provide some Marxian analysis about, rents and whatnot. But, there's like some smaller places that have closed, but there's some real, mainstay fixtures. Like the local 188's been open for like years and years, right? Yeah. I can't imagine. I don't remember a time when it wasn't open.
It was open in the late 90s.
So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's they're charging their meals are like $40 for like an entree, and so if you should get like a drink and an appetizer, you are out of luck. It's just completely untenable. So it's hard times. I guess I don't go out to eat very. What I get is like a burrito on Burrito Thursday. When it's only $12 from the place across the way there. It does seem like a brutal time. I was reading an article, a lengthy article about the end of like Old Port Fest, and that used to bring like a lot of money to like all the restaurants and businesses and let them do all the maintenance needed. So they would be like all set for the summer, and then they got.
Oh, that's true. Is that true? That's interesting.
Yeah, it was just like a huge economic impact, on the town or the city, and I guess it was like a business group that got rid of it, and then they just got rid of it and wouldn't field questions as to why. Although I think the popular theory is they felt it would lower the cost of housing, or it would. They're trying to have luxury housing.
Yeah. And, a little bit of flavor for those for the listeners of this international podcast who might not be familiar with the local Portland goings on. But I remember when Old Port Fest was a booze up, right? It was just out of control. There'd be one Sunday a year. All the bars would be open in the morning, and everyone would go there and get hammered. And so this article was saying that was. Then they tried to transform Old Port Fest into a family-friendly thing, but that killed it.
Old Port Fest used to actually be on Saturday. And it was really a booze fest. And now, so then they switched it to Sunday to try to rein it in, I guess. And then so after 6 o'clock, everyone went home. And the article said that it started in the 70s, I think, and there used to be more of a sense of camaraderie before it turned into a drinking event. But I don't know. Well, we don't do stuff like that anymore. That would be good for the local economy. And it seems like we got rid of this to cater to luxury apartments and whatnot. And so
4th Street, the row where all the bars are on here in Portland, used to be crazy. At 1 o'clock in the morning, all the cops would be there. The bars would close at 1, and everyone would have to get to their cars. And around 11:30 or 12, they would come and tow all the cars that foolishly parked on 4th Street. It used to be quite a scene. But now it's all hotels and luxury condos on that street and retail shops, and no more bars and no more hooliganry in the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, and it was on Thursday. At the insurance company I work at, we had a vendor who was taking us out to dinner, and the vendors were paying, and so we went to all the places like Scales and whatnot. Well, there's a cruise ship in town. So Central Provisions, all the high end places, you could not get a seat. So we had to settle for some more middling seafood place. So all the high end places though were had waits for hours and hours, and then all the regular places were abandoned. Huh. And that's just part of there's this cruise ship culture, and so they're just trying to make money off of whales. And there's just no money in catering to the middle class is what I'm trying to get at here, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of depressing. I miss Old Port Fest. Yeah, I had some good memories. It's a little sad, but at least we got the Chat GPT now.
Yeah. Portland used to be a hell of a town, and it still is in many ways, but the nightlife is all but collapsed. It's just not what it once was. And we have the sinister forces of finance capital to blame for it, Brian.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we may switch gears for a moment, Brian, I have for your consideration another article that I just found interesting. And I'm always on here trying to poke holes in the institutions and ideologies behind science itself. And so here was an interesting article. Now, I've got a little TLDR here, meaning too long, didn't read. The article itself is from livescience.com. I can put the link to the article in the show notes. So I'll include the Portland Press Herald article also. I think I will. I don't know if most people worldwide are going to care, but hey, if I'm putting links in the show notes, might as well do them all. And the headline here is James Webb Telescope confirms there is something seriously wrong with our understanding of the universe. So, again, I'm going to read you a summary and not the article itself, just because it'll make for better pod. So here's a little summary. The James Webb Space Telescope has confirmed a significant discrepancy in the measurement of the expansion rate of the universe, known as the Hubble tension. This issue, which has been a subject of debate in the scientific community, suggests that there may be something seriously wrong with our current understanding of the universe. The Hubble telescope measurements in 2019 and the James Webb Space Telescope measurements in 2023 have shown that the universe appears to be expanding at different speeds depending on the location, which could potentially alter or even upend cosmology. Despite initial thoughts that the discrepancy might be due to measurement errors or crowding, the latest data from both telescopes working together has ruled out these possibilities with high confidence. The study, published in the Astrophysical Journal Letters, suggests that there may be a fundamental problem with our understanding of the universe, particularly the Big Bang Theory. The Hubble tension remains a significant challenge for cosmologists who are now working to understand and resolve this discrepancy. So what's happening here is we thought that the universe was a certain size, and we thought that it was expanding at a certain rate, and we used that date to extrapolate backwards to the date of the Big Bang, which is just a bizarre placeholder for something we don't understand at all. But now it turns out that the universe is not expanding at a constant rate, and depending on where you measure, you get different rates of expansion. And so now we're getting some different ages potential. You may have heard on the JRE about a year or two ago, they were acknowledging, or maybe about a year ago, because it would have to have been the James Webb Space Telescope that fed them the data. But he was talking to some astrophysicists about what's going on, why don't we know the date of the universe? And the astrophysicist in question was like dismissive, trying to be, oh no, we know what we're talking about, but really no, they have no idea what they're talking about. The data coming in from the James Webb Space Telescope shows that, like, I guess you have to be, if you are in the casino for the first time in your life and you're playing the roulette table, you might be forgiven for thinking that the roulette is a 50-50 game of chance, right? You have to be around the block a few times and see a couple of those zeros or double zeros and the green spaces pop up on the roulette table before you realize that the fix is in, right? That there's something fishy going on here. And that's kind of how I'm feeling like when you go to school and you're young, they just download the current scientific paradigm into you, and you just think that it's like a sidewalk square that's dried. It's like it's locked in place, But as you are alive for a couple decades, you see them change their story, and now suddenly it's like a witness on the witness stand who's changing their story and just destroying their credibility.
They're crumbling under cross-examination.
Yeah, so you're like, so the idea of the scientific corpus of knowledge is so fluid and changing that trying to use it as some kind of a fundamentalist orientation to reality is just no way to do business at all. And I think that in addition to the James Webb Space Telescope, real cracks in the facade of scientism became too obvious to ignore during the COVID era. So it's interesting to me to see now how not just a lot of people now don't trust authorities from the halls of science in the way that they maybe did pre-2020. That's certainly true for me, and I imagine it's true for a lot of other people as well. And other people have dug in and redoubled their faith in scientism. But it's interesting to note that similar things happened in the Roman Empire during the Antonine Plague, which is the subject of this week's enticing system failure essay.
Oh, sounds interesting.
The Antonine Plague caused people to turn away from the legacy Roman religion and embrace Christianity. And then, hilariously, 1,200 years later, Christianity was once the up and coming contender, knocking out the grizzled veteran boxer. Now, Christianity is defending the title belt, and this new up and coming ideology, magic, became popular in the wake of the Black Death because the church's total inability to deal with the Black Death caused people to stop believing in it. And it's very interesting to see that dynamic play out, not just in the late Roman Empire and not just in the late Middle Ages, but now here you are again in 2021, and people are realizing that our authorities have made some compromises with reality and are not the authority that they have purported themselves to be. And so that's why I was really fascinated to find out that the findings coming off the James Webb Space Telescope have totally upended cosmology as understood even just a few years ago. It's fascinating stuff.
Well, I think, if you watch like 2001: A Space Odyssey, they're suggesting, or Stanley Kubrick is suggesting something grander about space than, I don't know, there's some planets here and maybe we'll travel to some other planets if we somehow get sufficiently good technology. There's something much crazier going on.
Yeah.
As to what it is exactly, it's hard to say. But, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of the Kubrickian view of things. I guess, I guess I'm more inclined to say that, like, Tracy's view of, philosophy, that, like, we sort of pick our incarnation, and I don't know, we're here to, like, learn some kind of lesson. I mean, it grows on me the older that I get. Although, on the other hand, I don't know why I struggle with the anxiety sometimes. Well, anyway, it kind of seems like this. We're just here to learn some kind of crazy lesson, like this AI business, and I don't know. We're here learning something about the nature of what it means to be human, or something. Or there's all kinds of lessons about morality. There's no shortage of like things to be learned. It would be crazy to have been born in like it was some dynasty in China where you just did what your parents did, and your parents did what their parents did for like generations and generations, and everything. It was just a state of like super homeostasis. But now we're in this era of like wild change, and I don't know. It seems like we're here to like learn some kind of lessons or something, right? Is like the intuition that I get.
Yeah, I agree about there's something grandiose about the cosmos and the human experience. I'm just not so sure. My disagreement with Tracy, and she may have me convinced yet, but I just think that the individual is not so. You're looking for a reflection of that grandiosity at the individual level. I don't think the individual is any more important than the structure of any one individual wave is to the ocean, right? We're just our code and our the 4D matrix we're living in and our genetic code are clearly components of a much larger system, most of which we can't apprehend. But there are people that like are killed within weeks of being born, right? They can't be that they can't be that that's to learn a lesson for them, right? Maybe it's to learn a lesson for someone else, or something like that. But I just don't think that. I think humanity is important. I'm just not so sure the individual is important.
Well, if you get snuffed out when you're just a few weeks old or whatever, like maybe it is a self-fulfilling prophecy to some extent. Like obviously you don't really get to build your anonymity, you don't get to get much articulation, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in your control over your destiny or whatever. So I don't know, if you get snuffed out, it doesn't mean, I don't know, it's just like humans are like capable of pondering these like moral questions. Like how crazy it would be not to have these like moral and ethical conundrums and to like think about the future.
Well, we should be like the rough beast of the field then. That's the thing that makes us human, right? Agonizing about our mortality, lying awake at night, and thinking about your inevitable demise. Yeah, we are the tortured ape poets.
Yeah, we're just conscious enough to ponder these questions. Yeah. But I don't know. Well, I guess I agree that the individual is just part of a bigger system. I'll just put it there.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't. I just wouldn't put too much. We each have individualized point of view or perspective or whatever. But I wouldn't. I just wouldn't worry too much. I think maybe that is the lesson we're here to learn: is that your individual iteration of the code is just not so important, but the code itself and the way that it interacts with whatever the matrix is maybe the lesson we're supposed to learn here.
Well, it isn't like you're not doing something though as an individual, right? And I mean, I agree with like the wave model of which you speak, but it doesn't mean like your particular iteration of the wave like doesn't matter. It just means it's part of a greater whole. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, for one way or another, it seems like we're here to experience this, right? And I don't know. Like the models of the universe, people want something reductionist or whatever. Or I don't know what people are hoping for. But the universe is like obviously like a crazy place of mystery. And I don't know if there's some question as to like that. I guess you should take 5 dried grams to the dome and find out, right?
Yeah, that's some of that old school Christianity involving some real psychedelics.
And I mean, I used to. Well, I mean, we really were super reductionist there back in our atheism days, huh?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know. I don't really. I don't know if I can easily be put into any one box. And like the religious sometimes drive me crazy. I guess oftentimes it doesn't seem like they actually have a very sophisticated view on things. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have all the answers.
Well, me neither. But what I can do is tie all this back to cosmology and to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Because at the beginning, you may recall the very beginning of 2001: A Space Odyssey, there at the moment when the first obelisk appears and inspires the apes to begin using a chunk of bone as a tool, there's a total solar eclipse, right? That's the first thing that happens in the film. Like the lights come up, the music plays, thus spoke Zarathustra, the name of the music named after the Nietzsche book. And then there's a total solar eclipse. And having seen a total solar eclipse here in Maine, last April the 2nd or 1st, whatever that was, it really is strange. Like it can't be the case if you were not home, Brian, and I came into your apartment and I left like one of those big, maybe I left a big fair, like one of those big plushies that you can win at the fair, like a big stuffed animal. I put it in the middle of your living room and left. Right, you would notice it when you came home. And if I texted you saying, "Brian, did you notice anything in your house that was gone?" You'd be like, "Yeah, there's a huge orange panda bear in my living room." Right, there has to be some objective reality. In other words, right, something is keeping track of where this orange panda bear is, such that you can relay its information accurately to me, having no pre-knowledge of it whatsoever. But on the other hand, there's the placebo effect and the double slit experiment, which show that the universe is a construct localized within the mind. So the eclipse is interesting to me because it's very odd that our moon should be exactly the same apparent size as the sun. It's such an odd coincidence that it makes me think, what if we're the magical tradition, the one that I mentioned, was the up-and-coming contender to the Roman Catholic Church's grizzled title belt defender during the Middle Ages. Magic, the idea was that you are a co-creator of reality with God, right? In all times and places, the true reality the truth is that we are that we're involved in the creation of reality in the same way that you're involved in the creation of your dreams. That is a truth that the powerful never want. Once any institution becomes co-opted by the powerful, it always denies that truth, right? The Catholic Church, the Christian Church, was once very magical. If you look at old pictures of the Christian rites, which you can find in Brian Murarescu's book that come from underneath St. Peter's Basilica, the old necropolis, the original Christian rites involved a magical cup and magic wands. Like the Christians standing around holding these magic wands. And you're like, well, this is very strange. That's not the image of Christianity we're used to. And that's because by the time the Middle Ages rolled around, the Christianity had ossified into this rigid authority. And they had abandoned the truth that we're co-creating reality with God, and instead had taken up the position that only God creates reality. You do not create reality. Your job is to go to work and be grateful for the opportunity to make us money. And that conception of reality where you're a partner with God in the creation of the universe we experience really makes the eclipse seem, it puts if we really are building out the universe as we experience it, then it shouldn't be a wonder that when we gaze through the apparatus of the James Webb Space Telescope, that we are getting readings that are not consistent with a hard materialistic universe like the one that we used to focus on during our atheist days, Brian. In other words, we agreed with the powerful that that we are tiny minds walking around inside a grand reality, observing it with our senses, but not creating it. Whereas the magicians, the magical tradition, the spiritual tradition, has always been that you are creating reality by observing it. So the two things, the eclipse where the moon and the sun are the same size, and the weird thing where the further out in space you point the telescope, when you point the James Webb telescope into deep space, you get these weird readings that are inconsistent with a objective universe. Yeah, that's the ticket.
Well, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but like with the eclipse there, well, I mean, what it is that the moon and the sun are like the same size, relatively, right, given their distance from the Earth, of course.
The apparent size of these two disks is almost exactly the same.
But, yeah, I mean, like, I just wonder, like, what the actual... Because the moon could be, quite a bit bigger than the sun and still have this total eclipse thing work, right?
Yes, yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Well, the Earth is quite a bit bigger than the moon, and we get the lunar eclipses where the shadow of the Earth plays across the moon. But you get a lot more of those because we are much bigger relative to the size of the moon than the solar eclipses.
Well, anyway, it is. It's interesting that the solar eclipse, works as well as it does. And then there's a thing where the moon is like in the perfect spot in the orbit where there's a dark side of the moon and a regular side of the moon that always faces Earth the same way.
Yeah,
it's a little bizarre.
Well, that explanation, you imagine that if there was an impactor in the proto-solar system and a big glob separates from the Earth. If in other words, the moon is a chunk of the Earth that got knocked off and into orbit, it totally makes sense that the rotation about its axis would match the periodicity of the Earth's rotation around its axis, right? Like, it would make sense that it would be in tidal lock with the Earth if it was, it's like any satellite in geostationary orbit, right? It's in such an orbit that its velocity around the Earth matches the Earth's rotation, so that the satellite seems to hang over us. So, if in fact what you're saying is true, it's really weird that the moon has all these properties. But the fact that the moon's orbital rotation, the moon's period around the Earth matches the Earth's orbital rotation, just it makes sense that if the moon came from an impact that would be the case. But I cannot think of any circumstances that would make it so that the moon and the sun are the same apparent size in our sky. It's really weird. It's just an outrageous coincidence.
Yeah, well, either like life exists here because all the circumstances like happen to be right,
yeah,
and well, also the circumstances happen to be right for like intelligent life to develop, not just life itself. And like the moon and having an eclipse, I can just kind of fathom that maybe that somehow has something to do with like higher consciousness developing or something, or at least if you're trying to like cultivate a religion. Like the very beginnings of some kind of pattern observation. An eclipse would be a real mind blower and would probably do something.
Yes, and there is one theory in that vein that not intelligent life, but life itself may depend on having tide pools. So what you need to have is some kind of a ratio between the lunar pull of the moon and I think the lunar pull of the moon and to some degree the sun, but I think it's really the moon, the differential between the moon's gravity on Earth on one side of the Earth versus the far side of the Earth. That's what gives us the tides. And so maybe the tide, you can't have crazy tides. You have to have tides of a certain magnitude to where you'll get tide pools there where the first life forms kind of gel and form. So maybe you need shallow tide pools that sometimes are open to the ocean and sometimes just sit there stagnant, baking in the sun. Who knows? We are far afield. We've wandered far down the path of puerile speculation now, but it's just an idea.
I guess, like, in any case, I think what you have to say about, like, the placebo effect and, like, the double slit experiment, and then there's just all this other questionable stuff, like maybe our inability to get an accurate measurement about the universe and, 2001: A Space Odyssey and what it all means. I mean, it just does seem like our consciousness in one way or another is special somehow.
Yeah.
And so in what way it's special is, like, hard to put one's finger on. But it does seem special somehow. And I guess that's probably the simplest, the best thing I can say about it.
The ideology of science has done everything it can to, like the discovery that the Earth is not at the center of the orbital trajectories of all the planets and the sun and the moon, and is in fact in motion around the sun like the other planets are, was a devastating blow to our self-esteem, and it made it allowed scientists to make us out to seem like we're nothing but just slightly more intelligent versions of all the other species of the forest. But I think once you realize that human intelligence is making the universe around us, or intelligence in general is making the universe around us, instead of intelligence being something that's created inside of a universe, the universe is being created by intelligence, right? It's a way of slapping Galileo's telescope, right? Spinning Galileo's telescope around and be like, yes, it is true that the Earth is not at the center of all of the orbital trajectories, but that does not mean that human intelligence, or let's just say intelligence, is not at the center of the universe. It's a way of relocating, realizing that the universe is a product of the mind is a way of relocating human mind to the center of the universe, where Copernicus and Galileo, displaced us from, 5 centuries ago. So yeah, that's what I got to say about the James Webb Space Telescope, Brian.
Okay, that's pretty wild.
All right, well, I think that's a pretty good place to leave the pod for this week. What do you reckon?
All right, sounds good.
This is usually the moment when I invite our listeners to send us an email and let us know what you think of our science heresy by sending us a message at nop@substack.com. And if you'd like to jump on and read this week's exciting essay about the Antonine Plague or any number of other weekly topics, why, you can log on to nop.substack.com, sign up for your weekly newsletter there, and get the essays delivered straight to your email inbox. And with that, we will bid you all an adieu until next week.
Alrighty, folks, we'll see ya.